It seems like data's on everyone's mind these days. And it makes sense, right? It's totally changing the way businesses do things. Skilled data analytics professionals, well, they're in super high demand.
Yeah, they are.
You actually sent over some cool stuff from a business data analytics exam prep course, so I'm thinking you're looking to boost your expertise, maybe even gear up for the IBA exam.
That's right.
We're going to do a deep dive into the organizational strategy domain.
Awesome.
That's session 12 in the course, and it really zones in on how companies structure those analytics operations to really make them successful. So let's jump right in.
That's a really strategic area to focus on, especially if you want to make a real impact.
I thought so too. This prep course is intense. 12 sessions, 4 hours each. That's a lot. It covers chapters from both IBO and McGraw-Hill, which is great for a well-rounded view. We're focusing on how companies actually build out their analytics teams.
Okay.
I notice a lot of them start small, like with proof of concept projects before going all in on data.
Yeah, it's like dipping their toes in the data pool first. These initial projects, they're usually chosen because they don't have a huge impact on the company's overall strategy. It lets them test things out, learn, before committing big resources.
I can see why that's a smart move, yeah. You wouldn't want to completely redo your data strategy without trying it out a little first. So once a company's had a few wins, how do they ramp up their analytics efforts?
Well, there are a few models, organizational models, that companies use. Centralized, decentralized, and then there's the hybrid. Each has its own pros and cons, and that depends on the company's size, structure, and goals, of course.
Okay, so let's unpack those. What's a centralized model look like in real life?
So picture this. All the data analysts and scientists all working together as one big team. It's efficient, right? You've got all that expertise and resources in one place, which can streamline things and keep costs down.
That sounds good for collaboration and consistency, but wouldn't different departments feel kind of disconnected from the data analysis process?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's where the decentralized model comes in.
Okay.
Each business unit has its own dedicated analytics team. Think of it like embedding data experts right within each department.
Okay.
They get to know the specific data and processes of that unit really well, so you can get more customized solutions that way.
I see the pluses of both approaches. So hybrid's got to be a mix of the two, right?
Yeah, you got it. It's about grabbing the best of both worlds.
Okay.
You might have a central team for the overall strategy and the shared resources, but then specialized teams within each business unit to tackle their specific needs. For instance, a company might have a central data engineering team that handles building and maintaining all the data infrastructure. But then you have like the marketing and finance departments, and they might have their own analysts to make sense of the data that's relevant to their areas.
So no cookie cutter approach here. How does a company figure out which model fits them best?
A lot of factors to consider, starting with how data is managed and accessed within the company. Basically, who owns the data and how easy is it to get to it?
Right.
Some companies have these really strict data governance policies, while others are more open. And then there's the whole question of outsourcing. Are they willing to hand off some of the analytics work, or do they keep everything in-house? The competitive landscape matters too. If a company's in a super fast-paced industry, they might need a data analytics setup that's more agile, one that can respond quickly. Even industry trends and regulations play a role. Like, think about healthcare companies and all the new data privacy regulations that's had a huge impact on their data strategies.
Sounds like picking the right model is kind of a juggling act with a lot of pieces in the air.
Definitely is. It's more than just the structure of the team. It's about making sure that structure works with the company's overall goals and culture. Speaking of teams, though, putting together a strong analytics team goes beyond the org chart, right?
Right.
You've got to attract and keep those top data professionals, which is a whole challenge in itself these days, given how competitive things are.
For sure. Data folks are in high demand. They've got options. What are companies doing to stand out and snag those top performers?
Well, money always talks, right? Competitive compensation is a big factor, of course. But the best data pros, they're looking for more than just a fat paycheck. They want projects that matter, where they can see their work having a real impact.
So it's got to be meaningful, not just a job.
Exactly. They love solving tough problems, so they're drawn to companies that offer those challenging, impactful projects.
So it's not just about the pay crack. It's got to be fulfilling work, too. What else gets those data rock stars excited?
Learning and development opportunities are huge. This field changes all the time, so data professionals are always looking to learn new skills, stay ahead of the curve.
Right.
Companies that put money into their employees' professional development through training programs, conferences, mentorship, they have a much easier time attracting and keeping those top people.
Makes sense. They'd want to work for a company that supports their growth. Anything else that comes into play?
Often overlooked, access to cutting-edge tools and technologies.
Right.
Data professionals want to use the newest analytics software, cloud computing platforms, machine learning stuff. They want to be on the cutting edge. They need the right tools to shine. It's like giving a talented musician outdated instruments, right? They wouldn't be able to play their best. Same idea with data pros.
Got to give them the right tools to excel. What about the overall work environment? Does that matter much?
Big time. Company culture is huge in attracting and keeping talent.
Okay.
Data professionals, they're looking for a culture that values collaboration, innovation, and data-driven decisions. They want to be in an environment where they're valued, respected, and can share their idea.
So it's about the whole package, not just the job.
Exactly. It's got to be a supportive and stimulating work environment where they can thrive.
We've talked about the different organizational models and what draws in the best talent. What are the core pieces of a really successful talent strategy?
Three pillars organizations need to focus on. First, setting up the right team structure, which we touched on before with the centralized, decentralized, and hybrid models.
Okay.
Each one needs a different way of defining roles, responsibilities, and how everyone reports to each other.
So figuring out who does what and how everyone fits together, depending on the chosen model.
Exactly. The second pillar is about creating a learning and development environment, a whole ecosystem for it.
Got it.
This goes way beyond just, offering a training session every now and then.
Yeah.
It's about building a culture where people are constantly learning, where they're encouraged and supported in their professional growth. Think mentorship programs, internal platforms for sharing knowledge, even budgets specifically for conferences and workshops.
Creating that learning culture, right? What's the third pillar then?
Setting up best practices for all those analytics initiatives.
Okay.
This is about making sure that how you collect data, analyze it, and use it to make decisions, all of that's consistent and high quality. Standardized processes, good documentation, and knowledge sharing are super important. Imagine a company where every single analyst does things their own way and doesn't document anything. It would be a mess.
Total chaos. So standardized processes and documentation, those are key for creating a more, I guess, cohesive and efficient data operation.
Yeah, for sure. It's about everyone working from the same playbook, which leads to more reliable and impactful data insights.
This is fascinating. Who are the key players on these data analytics teams, though?
You've got a mix of people, each with their own special skills and expertise. First, you've got the subject matter experts, the SMEs. They know the ins and outs of the specific area you're analyzing. So say you're looking at sales data. You'll want someone from the sales team who really gets how the sales process works.
Bringing that real-world context to the data.
Exactly. They help connect the dots between the data and what's actually happening in the business. Then you've got your data architects or solution architects.
Okay.
They're responsible for designing and building the systems that capture, store, and manage all that data. Think of them as the architects of the whole data infrastructure.
Laying the groundwork for everything else. Who else is on the team?
You've got data engineers. They're the builders, the ones who put together and keep up the data pipelines and infrastructure.
Okay.
They make sure the data flows smoothly from where it starts to where it needs to go.
So it gets to the right place.
Right. Then you've got data scientists. They use their stats and machine learning skills to really dig into that data, build models, and find those hidden patterns and insights.
So they're the ones who find the gold in the data mine, basically.
Yeah. Then there are data analysts, and they take those insights and turn them into reports and visualizations that anyone can understand.
Okay.
They're the storytellers, helping the business make sense of the data and use it to make smarter choices.
It's a whole team effort then. Everyone's got a crucial part to play.
Absolutely. And depending on what the company needs, you might have even more specialized roles, like experienced designers who focus on creating user-friendly dashboards and visualizations. Or you might have data journalists who are great at communicating those data insights to a wider audience. And then there are business analysis professionals. They bridge the gap between what the business needs and what the data analysis shows. They make sure those data insights turn into real actions.
It's amazing how many different skill sets are needed to make data actually work for a company.
It really is a team effort, and every role is super important.
Okay, so we've covered how these teams are structured, the key players, what attracts and keeps top talent. But what about the overall data strategy for the entire organization? How does that fit in?
Now we're going from the team level to the organizational level.
Right.
An organization-level data strategy is like a big roadmap for everything related to data within a company. It's a comprehensive plan that takes into account both internal and external data sources, and it lays out how the data will be collected, managed, analyzed, and used to reach those business goals.
It's about making the whole organization data-driven, not just one team.
You got it. And this strategy needs to address key planning considerations, data governance, data architecture, data security, and metadata management.
Let's break those down a bit. Data governance, what's that all about?
Data governance is about setting up the rules and policies for how you handle data. It's about making sure data is high quality, consistent, and you can trust it. Think of it like guardrails that keep everyone moving in the right direction and make sure data is treated as something valuable.
Making sure everyone's speaking the same data language, basically. What about data architecture then?
Data architecture, that's like the blueprint for how data is structured and organized within a company.
Okay.
It sets the standards for how data is collected, stored, integrated, and accessed. Having a well-defined data architecture makes it way easier to find and use data, which is crucial for good analysis.
So it's about making data easy to access and use. What about data security?
Data security, well, it's absolutely crucial in today's world. It's about protecting all that sensitive information from unauthorized access, breaches, cyber attacks, all of that. You need robust security measures to keep your data safe and accurate, to comply with all the regulations, and to protect the company's reputation.
It's about building a fortress around all that data. And what's this metadata management all about?
Metadata, it's basically data about data.
Okay.
It tells you what the data means, where it came from, how it's structured, who's responsible for it. If you manage your metadata well, it makes data much easier to discover and understand, which is super important for effective analysis and decision-making.
So it's like a data dictionary, helping everyone understand and use data effectively.
Exactly. Welcome back to our deep dive into organizational strategies for business data analytics. It's great to be back, continuing our exploration of this topic with you.
Me too. We just wrapped up talking about the big picture of organizational data strategies. And now I'm really interested to learn more about what the IB specifically recommends for actually putting these strategies into practice.
Perfect segue. The IBA actually provides a really practical framework for tackling this domain.
Okay.
They break it down into tasks, techniques, and skills. It's not just theory, it's about giving you actionable steps to make data really work for your organization.
Let's get into the details then. What are some of the key tasks the IB outlines?
The first one is all about defining the current state.
Okay.
This means taking a deep dive into the organization's existing data landscape. It's like taking inventory,
Okay.
figuring out what data they have, where it lives, how it's being used or not used, and what the current infrastructure and processes look like.
So you're getting a clear picture of what's actually happening with data before you start making any changes.
Exactly. It's about understanding where the organization stands in terms of data maturity, including its strengths, weaknesses, and any roadblocks they're already facing. Think of it as a data checkup to figure out how healthy the patient is before you start prescribing any treatments.
Makes sense. You wouldn't jump into solutions without diagnosing the problem first. So once you've assessed the current state, what comes next?
Next up is defining the future state.
Okay.
This is where you envision that ideal data landscape for the organization. Where do they want to be in terms of data capabilities, and how will data help them reach those big strategic goals?
It's like setting the vision for what data can do for the organization, but how do you make sure that vision is actually achievable?
That's where the third task comes in. Performing gap analysis, you're basically comparing that current state with the dream future state to pinpoint the gaps that need to be bridged. What resources, skills, changes in processes are needed to get from point A to point B.
It's like planning a trip, right? You know, your starting point and your destination, now you got to figure out the best way to get there.
Exactly. And that path is probably going to involve a bunch of things like investments in new technology, training for employees, updates to data governance policies, and even some shifts in the company culture around data.
This is starting to feel very strategic and action-oriented. What's the next step in this process?
Once you've figured out the gaps and some potential ways to fill them, you move on to recommending the business case.
Okay.
This is where you build that compelling argument for investing in data and analytics. You have to show the value it'll bring by quantifying the potential benefits and justifying the costs.
So you're making the case for why data matters, how it'll help the bottom line.
Exactly. You've got to convince those stakeholders that putting money into data is a smart move for the business, not just a tech upgrade. This might mean showing data-driven projections, highlighting success stories from other companies, or even pointing out the risks of falling behind in a data-driven world.
It's about painting that clear picture of the return on investment. Makes sense. What's the last task in this domain?
The final task is planning the implementation roadmap. This is all about making a detailed plan to put those recommendations into action. It includes outlining the specific steps, timelines, resources needed, and key milestones to track your progress. You're turning that vision into a concrete action plan.
Sounds like a project management plan, but for data.
You could say that. Having a well-defined roadmap makes sure everyone's on the same page, working towards that same goal. It also helps manage expectations and see how far you've come along the way.
These tasks give organizations a solid framework for approaching their data strategy. But what about the techniques? How do you actually tackle these tasks in real life?
The IBRA suggests a few techniques that you can use. One that's pretty common is benchmarking and market analysis.
Okay.
This involves looking outside your organization to see how other companies in your industry, maybe even your competitors, are approaching data.
Interesting. So it's about learning from what others are doing, seeing what works well in the market.
Exactly. It can help you spot areas where you can improve and potential opportunities to do things differently. Another helpful technique is business capability analysis. This means figuring out your organization's current and future capabilities and how those line up with their strategic objectives, of course, with a focus on data.
So you're figuring out what your organization needs to be good at, especially when it comes to data and analytics, to really succeed.
Right, this helps identify any gaps in those capabilities that need to be addressed and figure out where to invest resources to make the biggest impact on the business.
These techniques give us practical ways to tackle those tasks we talked about earlier. But what about the people doing this work? What skills do they need to excel in this area?
That's crucial. The IBU really stresses the importance of specific skills for success here. One of the biggest ones is business acumen.
Okay.
This goes beyond just knowing about data. You have to understand the business itself, its operations, the industry, its goals, and its challenges.
So you need to see how data connects to real business outcomes.
Exactly. Data pros need to see the big picture and understand how their work contributes to the organization's success. Then there's communication, which is essential for any data-related role. You need to be able to explain those complex data concepts and insights in a way that everyone can understand, whether they're technical or not.
It's like translating data into a language everyone can understand.
Exactly. You want to make data accessible and actionable for everyone in the company, from the CEO all the way to those frontline employees. And finally, collaboration is key. Data professionals, they almost never work alone.
Right.
They have to be able to work effectively with people from different departments like IT, business units, and leadership.
So being a team player and working well with people from different backgrounds and perspectives is essential.
Absolutely. Building strong relationships, communicating clearly, working together towards a common goal, those are all essential ingredients for success in this domain.
This has been so insightful. We've covered the tasks, techniques, and skills the IDF recommends for really mastering that organizational strategy domain. It's clear that you need a unique combination of technical expertise, business knowledge, and those all-important people skills.
Definitely. And it's such a fascinating and rapidly growing field. But before we finish this part, I want to stress that it's not just about putting the right structures, processes, and tech in place.
Right.
You also need to manage the human side of change.
That's a great point. Any major shift, especially one that involves data, you have to think about how it affects people and how to guide them through those changes.
Exactly. In the last part of our deep dive, we'll explore the crucial role of change management in those data initiatives and how to make sure everyone is on board and ready to embrace a data-driven future.
We're back for the last part of our deep dive on organizational strategies for business data analytics. We've covered a lot of ground, from picking the right team setup to getting those top data who's on board and creating a data-driven culture.
Yeah, we've
But like you said at the end of part 2, it's not all about the technical side.
Right.
The human element plays a big role in any data transformation.
Totally. You can have all the fancy technology and the smartest data scientists in the world, but if you don't bring people along with you on this journey, your data projects are probably going to fail.
So that's where change management comes in.
Right.
Let's talk about that. What are some of the things to keep in mind when you're rolling out a new data strategy and trying to get everyone on board?
Well, the first thing, and it's the most important, communication.
Okay.
People need to get why the organization is making these changes, what's in it for them, and how it's going to affect their everyday work. Clear, consistent, and open communication that's key throughout the whole process, from the initial planning stages all the way to the rollout and beyond.
So it's about keeping everyone in the loop and addressing any concerns they might have. What else matters?
Getting stakeholders involved is super important. You need to figure out who all will be affected by these changes, all the individuals and teams,
Right.
and bring them in right from the start. Get their feedback, really listen to what they're worried about, and make them feel like they're part of finding the solution, not just being told what to do.
Makes sense. People are more likely to go with the flow if they feel like they have a say in how things change. What about those who just don't like change? How do you deal with the folks who are holding on to the old ways of doing things?
That's where training and support are super important.
Right.
Give people the skills and knowledge they need to adjust to this new data-driven world, offer workshops, online classes, mentoring programs, whatever it takes to make them feel confident and comfortable with the changes. Don't forget, change can be tough for some people, so it's key to be patient, understanding, and supportive.
So it's about empowering people to embrace those new ways of working with data. Are there any other parts of change management that are especially important when it comes to data initiatives?
Something that often gets overlooked. Celebrating the small wins early on. Highlighting those successes, even if they seem small, it can make a big difference in keeping things moving and showing everyone the value of this data transformation. It creates this feeling of progress and excitement, which can be really contagious and help overcome any resistance that's still lingering.
Yeah, it's about showing people that this whole data journey is leading to real, tangible results. and that their work is making a difference.
Exactly. And it's not just about those big milestones. It's about recognizing the small wins along the way, the stuff individuals contribute, those moments of collaboration and innovation that push the transformation forward.
This has been so eye-opening. We've explored the strategic and organizational side of data analytics, dug into the tasks, techniques, and skills the IBA recommends, and now we've talked about how important change management is in making it all come together.
It has been quite a journey.
I know, right? It's clear that you need that mix of technical chops, business smarts, and people skills to really nail this.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, I'd like to leave our listener with something to think about.
Sure.
We've talked about picking the right organizational model, finding and keeping top talent, and building a culture that loves data. But in the end, whether a data initiative succeeds really comes down to whether people can adapt, learn, and grow.
That's a really important point. This field is changing so fast, you have to keep learning to stay ahead of the game. And it's not just about the technical stuff. It's about developing your critical thinking skills, your understanding of the business, and your ability to communicate so you can turn data into useful insights.
So embracing that continuous learning mindset, both for yourself and for the organization as a whole.
Exactly. It's a journey that never really ends. There's always something new to discover, new problems to solve, and new ways to use data to make things better.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into organizational strategies for business data analytics. It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope our listener got a lot out of it.
It was my pleasure. And to our listener, keep exploring this exciting field. See how you can use data to make a real difference in your own company.
Until next time, keep diving deep and let those data insights flow.